Hi everyone, John here, and this is version 2 of the Blue Warbler. This is my envelope-controlled tremolo and vibe. It's got the LFO controls over here, depth and rate. In the middle is a mode switch to go between vibe and tremolo. I'm going to start off in vibe mode. And over here is the sense control. I'm going to leave that down for now. It controls how much the envelope is allowed to mess with the LFO. So I'm going to be on the rhythm channel of the amp with a clean sound. Here's the bypass. And I'm going to start off with the depth a little below noon, around 11 o'clock for a subtle setting, and the rate in the middle. Here's the Blue Warbler. Bring the depth up to about 1 o'clock, and I'm going to put it on the slowest setting. So it's got this little bit of a lope to it, kind of a little bit of an asymmetrical sine wave, and that disappears a lot on the highest speed settings. So I'm going to bump the depth all the way up and put it on the highest speed. I'm going to switch over to the tremolo now. I'm going to stay on that same setting just so I can compare it to the amp. The tremolo in here is a little bit shallower than my amp on the highest speed setting and a little bit deeper than the amp on the lowest speed setting. Here's the Blue Warbler first. The amp on the highest speed and depth settings. So I always like to compare things to the tremolo on my amp. This is one of my favorite tremolos in this amp, so really nice to be able to have a comparison. Like I said, the slowest setting does it really hard on-off, but it's still kind of that same asymmetrical sine wave I was talking about before. And here's the amp on the slowest speed setting. So it gets slower than the amp, and the depth is pretty similar. I'm going to roll in the sense control. With this guitar, I have to put it about 2 or 3 o'clock to get much going on. If I had higher pickups, like in Sheridan with humbuckers, noon is a pretty good setting for the sense. Hotter pickups, just turn it down a little bit. Switch over to vibe mode and back to depth. So what happens is, if you play softly, it just goes along as normal. But when you play harder, it stops the LFO for a second. And if you turn off the sense control, it'll stop it for longer. And it's not perfect, so it's got this little bit of chaos that happens, stop it repeatedly, or especially if you slow down the speed. So it takes a few cycles to get going again. So if you stop it when it's on a really slow setting, it takes longer for it to come back in. And if you're on a high speed setting, it recovers really quickly. So one thing I like about that is that you can kind of change what you're doing. You can roll off the guitar's volume and you'll have modulation on whatever you're playing. It'll tend to not trigger the envelope as much on leads as on chords. So it just adds a little bit of versatility to a modulation effect and a little more expressiveness. So that's why I really liked it originally. Like I said, this is version 2 of the circuit, and I'll post the schematics and layouts and everything on the forums as usual. This is pretty close to what's going to be released by JMK PCBs for the PCB project. His will probably have a few different values, might be 1 or 2 tweaks, and maybe 1 or 2 extra options for different things you can do with the build. But the actual sound of it is pretty close to this. A few things that changed from the first version: it's now got a MOSFET for the dry path instead of a transistor, so much better input impedance and a little bit of a clearer sound. The envelope control's been pretty much completely redesigned and works very differently. The sense control actually controls multiple parameters for the envelope at the same time now. The depth control's been sort of flipped around. It used to make the LED darker when you turned it down. Now it makes it brighter, so you get a full range sound when you're on minimum depth instead of a more trebly sound. Also the rate control has a much wider speed range. I kind of capped this one a little bit slower than I'm used to, but that's just one component on the inside. One other thing is there's, like I said, there's a few other options for how to build this. It's actually possible to change it so that the envelope flips around and makes the effect quieter when you play. But I'll get into all that on the forums. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments or look me up. And I hope you've enjoyed this demo. Thanks.